Hello, and welcome to day 6 of Space News. My name's Mike. I read the news so you don't have to. Uh, as you can see, I have the Ars Technica webpage open. We're going to go through one of these articles together, starting with secret military space programs can be a little less secret. Many defense officials argue that less secrecy will lead to better security. Interesting, let's see why. So there's a photo up top of a delegation of French officers, and they are hanging out in the Vandenberg Space Force Base. That is the Space Force, that is the US Space Force Base out in California. And the article reads, late last year, Deputy Secretary of Defense Kathleen Hicks signed a memo to overhaul a decades-old policy on how the Pentagon keeps sensitive military programs secret. However, don't expect defense officials to openly discuss everything they're doing to counter China and Russia in orbit. Yeah, very little information currently exists as to the capabilities of the world superpowers in space currently. You have to ask yourself, do these programs have tugs that can take adversary satellites out of their specific orbit or dismantle them in place? Do they have technical counter weapons like jamming, counter Earth observation techniques? I'm aware of very little of these. Most of what we know about defensive satellites are that they are their capabilities, what they're able to do. They're able to take Earth observation captures. They're able to monitor signals coming from adversary satellites. Okay, so the article reads, John Plum, Assistant Secretary of Defense for Space Policy, revealed the policy change in a roundtable with reporters on January 17th. For many years, across multiple administrations, Pentagon have lamented their inability to share information. They argued it limits the military's capacity to connect with allies, deter adversaries, and respond to threats. This new policy removes legacy classification barriers that have inhibited our ability to collaborate across the U.S. government and with allies. So it doesn't sound like this is it doesn't sound like they are going to open the floodgates between government and the public. It just sounds like they're removing barriers between government, subsidiaries, and allies. Plum was careful to point out that Hick calls for declassification, not unclassification. So think of it as reduction. That's what we just pretty much just said. So some of the Pentagon's most secret space technologies, now part of a special access program, are only known by a few officials. These SAPs make it difficult to share information with allies or partners, and essentially big roadblocks. Overall, the department does overclassify, which shouldn't surprise anyone. If you want to maintain a certain level of security, it's better for everyone to assume that they can't tell someone something than they can. Generally, it's easier to assign a classification level to a document or program than it is to change the classification level. So once it's set, it's set. In almost all cases, this is a simple decision. Has its predecessors been classified? If so, classify it. Let's see if there's something more interesting. The Pentagon has identified China as the paramount national security threat to the US. Much of what the Pentagon is doing in space is geared toward maintaining the competitive advantage against China, who, by the way, is starting to really come through with their launch companies, both government and private. I'm sure they've always had a very reasonable amount of a very reasonable satellite capability. Lots of technologies developed there. They obviously have all of the manufacturing they need to put up many satellite ships, any sort of military craft. This overarching focus on China touches on all military space programs and the NRO's fleet of spy satellites. NRO. Did they mention NRO elsewhere? So, I'm not sure what the NRO is. The National Reconnaissance Office is a member of the U.S. intelligence community and an agency of the U.S. Department of Defense, which designs, builds, launches, and operates the reconnaissance satellites of the U.S. federal government. I assume the NRO also maintains the communication lines with private company satellites that offer their services to government programs as well, and provide satellite intelligence to several agencies, particularly signals intelligence, SIGINT. Okay, so the military is launching new constellations of satellites to detect and track hypersonic missiles. Right, we've seen more and more articles coming out on that over the last few years, demonstrating their ability to quickly get a satellite into orbit, and is interested in using commercial space capabilities from U.S. industry. I must say it's likely not just U.S. industry. They're going to use satellites from any NATO partner. Ranging from in-space refueling to broadband communications. So in-space refueling, this is where these tug companies come into play. You need a company that's able to transfer orbits and find your space, locate your spacecraft, connect to your spacecraft, perform the operation, perform the mission, whether it be refueling, orbital transfer, so assistance using the tug's thrusters to push both spacecraft into a certain place, to broadband communication. This is an interesting thing to know about most satellites is especially Earth observation satellites, is the throttle. The bottleneck is not on the satellite's ability itself to capture a lot of data of the Earth. The bottleneck is in the satellite's ability to get it down to the Earth. We have a very limited number of ground stations in places that provide a lot of band length. So, for example, if your satellite is in sun-synchronous orbit, you're passing over the poles, and so you would need a downlink station on the ground that is typically in a high latitude, because when you're taking captures of the Earth, you're taking photos over usually the mid latitudes. I was never good at this. I'm pretty sure latitude is the equator, right? Latitude measures the distance north or south of the equator, right? So typically you're taking images mid-latitude because that's where all the interesting targets are. And so if you want to orient your satellite such that your radio is pointed in the right direction towards a ground station antenna, you're taking your Earth observation bore site away from a possible target. And so it's just better if you can perform your transmitting operations well. You're either in eclipse, so on the side of the planet where you don't have any light, or you have ground stations in high latitudes at the poles. Effectively, the higher the better, and then you're able to downlink while you pass over the pole, and then once you pass over these more middle latitudes, you can get back into your Earth observation routine. So that's one way to get around this, is to, instead of transmitting from your satellite to a ground station, you transmit from your satellite to another satellite like Starlink and let them handle communications for you. And since they have 5,000, 6,000 satellites all forming this web, they can continue to pass information between each other until it finds a satellite that has a connection currently to a ground station, which one always will, and then it will downlink your data at really high rates. Our network of allies and partners is an asymmetric advantage and a force multiplier that neither China nor Russia could ever hope to match. Referring to NATO, assumedly, officials have said that the threat environment requires the military to be more agile, and it's vital to collaborate as much as possible with allies and commercial partners. Here's a picture of Kathleen Hicks, the Deputy Secretary of Defense. She, I assume, was leading these classified Senate briefings on artificial intelligence at the U.S. Capitol. All right, can we learn anything more about the technology from this? I'm not super interested in the politics personally. Classifications. The Space Force and NRO have a growing number of contracts with companies operating satellites for commercial remote sensing, maritime surveillance, and radio frequency detection. The data supplied by these companies are unclassified, so military officials can share their products more widely. It's commercial satellites, so they're going to be sharing their data with non-military customers, oil and gas companies, mining companies, agriculture companies, NGOs that are trying to track migrants or wartime problems. I'm sure there are many satellites that are providing information about the current state of Gaza to NGOs, so perhaps they know we're best to put their resources. And so all of that information will be declassified or unclassified. Gotta use the right term. Recent conflicts in Israel and Ukraine have amplified the importance of commercial satellite data to the military. So talking about Israel and Hamas and Ukraine and Russia, the ability to provide threat information to them from commercial partners makes operations a lot smoother. You can get more up-to-date information by using this large commercial network of remote sensing satellites. All right, and to wrap up the article, in 2021, the trade publication Breaking Defense reported that the Pentagon was close to revealing information about a super secret space weapon and providing a real-world demonstration of its capabilities to potential adversaries like China and Russia, but the report of an impending information dump never materialized. Very ominous. Nevertheless, Scheisse said that last month, commercial space reconnaissance capabilities contracted by the military provide their own measure of deterrence. The fact that we can take information that comes out of commercial sats and show that we've seen something that's happening on orbit and we don't have to go through the classification levels to be able to do it is incredibly powerful. Thank you, Stephen Clark. Again, always enjoy your articles, Eric Berger's articles. Other things that we can read today, we have this Astrobotic Peregrine spacecraft mission, which apparently was urged by NASA not to actually launch. And then there's an article about the NASA Ingenuity helicopter. I think I'm going to call it there. Thank you very much for sticking around. We'll see each other tomorrow. Have a lovely day.